Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the big mystery, to the grand cosmic play, to the big picture, and to our soul's journey and what that means for us. And we get to learn from each other's stories, which is so helpful when we're going through our own journey to find points of connection and commonality with others. We are social beings as human beings, and I love to have community. I love creating community. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and that's what I do. I love to create community and connection so that we can all learn from each other and have a place where we can talk about things that maybe people in mainstream aren't really talking about right now. And we have other people that are also talking about these topics, and we don't feel all alone and kind of lost and like we might be the crazy one in the crowd. We have a place where other people are seeing exactly the same things that we're seeing and understanding these experiences. And if you're interested in community, then I welcome you to join me for Butterfly Circle, which is part of my Reinvent Yourself training, master training for people who are really ready to go off on their own journey and tune into their own intuition and their own power and learn how to navigate life from that place rather than from the external world of what other people are saying and thinking. So I love to interview people who are also empowered to do their very best to live their own lives, to navigate outside of the paradigm and the system, to find new ways and new approaches. And today is no different. I welcome Mala Kennedy with us. Welcome, Mala.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Glad you're here. So Mala coaches women to find their voice so they can truly love their life. She is a life coach, writer, podcaster, mama, and spiritual soul seeker. She's on a mission to help women prioritize self-care and self-acceptance, to ensure they give themselves permission to always be their authentic self and speak their truth so they can experience joy in all areas of their life. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with your purpose. Like, what's your journey been like that led you to realize that you needed to embrace your own truth and start following your own path?
Well, it really goes pretty way back, really, because I was adopted. So I always had those feelings of not belonging and not accepting myself because I felt kind of caught between two worlds. My parents are Caucasian and I'm brown, and so in Australia where I live, there was always this kind of division for me. I didn't know where I really belonged, and I didn't feel like I fit into either culture. And I really wished I was white, which is like I think about that now and I'm like, oh, but I really did. And then I started getting vitiligo on my skin, which is it was where you lose the pigment in your skin, and I started getting it, and that just threw me because I started to have to really like look at myself, excuse me, and I was like looking at my skin and just in fear. I was living from a place of total fear and not accepting myself. But it was the catalyst. It changed everything, and it made me really start to realize, hey, you've got to start looking in the mirror now and like accepting yourself, or because this is happening no matter what happens. So I just had to come to this place of acceptance, and because I've experienced that so deeply in my own life, I'm so passionate about it, and it's yeah, really, I just want to help other people with that as well.
That's so beautiful. That's a challenging situation. I know. I've heard some other accounts of running into that uh, situation where, especially for a woman, like we tend to be really concerned about our appearance, or
Mm.
sensitive about our appearance. And, how did that change your way of dealing with your own self in terms of your self-love and your acceptance of your body?
Well, I mean, so I always kind of struggled a little with my appearance anyway, and was like, but I wasn't really doing any work. And then this started happening, and you know, it's a really unpredictable thing. So at first, nothing happened, not too much happened. It was a very slow process, and then it really escalated after I had my son. And I just didn't have a choice. I could either get really depressed and really sunk into the fear of what was happening, because it was really scary. And it was, I was really conscious of my appearance anyway, feeling like I had stuck out. Or I could look at it because I just had to somehow make peace with it. So I had to develop practices that I could do every day and really commit to. At first I was really uncomfortable. I really didn't enjoy doing this stuff at first because it felt so foreign to me and it felt so uncomfortable. And I'd already kind of been playing a little bit in spirituality and personal growth stuff, but I hadn't really committed to it. I was quite half-hearted, I guess you'd say. And this was just made me take it really, really seriously, especially in terms of loving myself. There was other stuff that I was really into, but loving myself was really, really difficult. So putting those practices in place, because if I didn't, I don't know if I would be here. That's the honest truth.
So what kind of practices did you put into place for loving yourself? How did you go about that?
The first thing I started to do was really simple. I would go to bed and I would just like look at my hands, or I would touch my hands and I would just tell them that I loved them and what I was grateful for. And then like pat them and stroke them and like my belly and stuff, parts of me that I felt I wasn't really comfortable with. It was really simple, but I did it every night and slowly started to accept it. And then just I also did a lot of mirror work. So, and that would take longer. And that was more challenging because I'd usually like take everything off and look at myself and really face off and really go deep into every single part of my body. And because it's on my skin, so it's different places on my body as well. But it made me like practice loving every part of my body as well, and just going through like front and back. Yeah.
That's powerful. You know, a lot of people find it hard to look at themselves in the mirror, just their face.
Mm,
Just that,
yeah.
just to look in there, because I have this thing I do with my clients and students when I first started working with them. It's called self-compassion in the mirror. So I invite them, like you did, to stand in front of the mirror and just, stand there, witness themselves, maybe their hand over their heart, their hand over their belly, and just breathe and just talk to themselves gently with kind words. And when I was on my own journey of healing, that was one of the first things I did, was stand in front of the mirror and just tell myself there is worth here. There's
Mm,
worth here. There's worth here, because I didn't believe there was. I had been so battled and beleaguered by so many situations in my relationship. So that's beautiful that I know that the power of that is so strong. But then to stand naked.
it's hard. It was hard. Especially at first, it was really challenging. I mean, I was really self-conscious, but doing that just shifted something, and it was slow. Like, I don't think you suddenly go from like hating yourself to loving yourself. I do not believe that at all. It takes little steps. I'm such a believer in baby steps, and like self-acceptance is kind of the foundation, and to get there, then you can start to love yourself and go up the scale kind of thing. So for me, yeah, it was a slow process. It took time, and I still have days where I'm like frustrated and it's hard, but I can go back to that, and I have that tool now, and it's so useful.
That's powerful. So, what other kinds of things did you do with yourself to get yourself into a space of really loving the way that you are?
One of the biggest things I did was getting sober, because I used to party a lot, and just it was my way of numbing things, really. So, through my 20s and teens and stuff, I was really partying a lot and not respecting myself. And it was, yeah, so there's a lot of blank moments there. It was a really blurry time, and it just was so I couldn't feel the pain. And so getting sober, when I did that, I had to feel everything. So I mean, it's an interesting one, because I've I've been sober twice, and the first time I did it, was really easy, and then I started like having a drink here and there, but it wasn't a problem for me at that time. And then the second time I gave it up, it was really easy, and it was because I made the decision. I really wanted it, and so sometimes people will say, "Oh, you've got so much willpower not to drink," and for me, it was really easy because I wanted it and I chose to not do it when I finally got to that place that I was ready to. And it just, yeah, now I just feel everything. I'm really present with myself all the time. I'm present with my kids. It's just, it was that really, to me, was the biggest act of self-love I could have ever done, getting sober.
Yeah, getting sober. Me too. I did that as well. Well, I think 9 years ago when I made my transformation and stepped out of my journey, boy, the first thing that I started realizing was it's probably not healthy to drink a whole bottle of wine by yourself at night
Yeah, I had that realization too.
and then crack open the second bottle because it wasn't
Mm.
enough. Hmm. Like I did that for like 6 months and then I was like, I think that needs to change. And so I gradually started changing that process. But how did you get yourself weaned off of it? Because there is like this dependency on it for a little while that I noticed I had. And, like for me, it was filling a hole inside of me that I felt like needed to be filled up. Like I needed to feel more whole. And then as I felt more whole, I didn't need it so much. But what was your process?
Well, for me, both times actually, um, I started drinking spritzers, so having sparkling water with my wine, and slowly over time, I really got the first time, especially, I really got sober over a like 6 month period. Um, and I was just having more sparkling water. And at first, it wasn't conscious, but I remember that time, like after New Year's Eve, I poured myself a drink, and it was like sparkling water with a teaspoon of wine, literally a teaspoon. I said, "What am I doing? I don't need this," and that was it. So that was easy. The second time, I knew I'd done it before, and so it wasn't willpower. It wasn't. I honestly really didn't have that much of a struggle. I remember the night before, or 2 nights before, I'd gone out with to my best friend's wedding, and I'd had a great night, and I'd had this drinks, so I'd been drinking, but it was a really fun night, but it wasn't bad. Nothing bad happened. And then the next day, I was visiting another state at the time, staying with my friend I hadn't seen for ages, and we were watching some girly TV show and drinking wine spritzers. Um, and then we just kind of as a dare, I said to her, "Let's just give up drinking for a week." Um, and she's like, "Yeah, yeah, sounds good." And then I just, I was like, I'm just doing it for a week. And the next day, I just knew. I reflected on the weekend, and I just realized that I could have had as much fun without alcohol. Um, so for, this isn't really that helpful, but it was really easy for me at the time. And I was drinking like spritzes most of the time because my body started rejecting alcohol actually as well. So if I would have a full glass of wine, I would be vomiting and really ill for the whole next day. So that kind of did help as well because my body was telling me so strongly, and our bodies are such messengers for us. So I had that, but it was a choice. And I really like this guy called Jim Fortin. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's really incredible, and he talks about this and the reptilian brain, and when you decide to do something and make it your past and say that it's in the past, then you can move forward and let go of something. And it was funny. I was listening to him talk about this process of addiction and how it comes from the reptilian brain, like, and also it's a survival thing, like trying to protect us. And everything he was saying and how you decide to let something go, it was exactly what I did, but I hadn't realized that I was doing it. I made the decision and I said, I don't drink anymore, and I made it a part of my past. And so just automatically became a part of my past. It was almost like I tricked my brain because I talked about it in the past tense. And I know it sounds simple, but it worked, and it was really easy for me because I was so committed to it. There was so much at stake for me, and there was so much more value in not drinking than drinking, that it made it an easy
Mm-hmm.
decision for me.
Yeah, I love that. I actually had a guest on when I was doing my Skills Not Pills videos and sharing those out in the world. She was a health coach, and she said that she doesn't try to take anything off of someone's plate, because when you try to take something away, it's like person feels like they're losing that thing, and then
Mm.
the feeling of loss just makes it harder to stick to it. That's why diets don't really work.
Mm.
She said, so what she did was she would just crowd the plate. She would just crowd the plate. So, let them have on the plate what they want, but then like put the really good stuff on there too, and then just keep crowding the good stuff onto the plate
Mm.
until the not so good stuff, like the processed foods and all that, just like slide off the plate. Like there's just no more of those.
Mm.
So that sounds like what you did. You just used the sparkling water, which is like the healthy thing, and you just kept crowding it in the glass and crowding out the
Mm.
wine. So it
I
wasn't,
did.
you weaned yourself that way.
Yeah, and I mean the second time, I mean I guess I did it the second time that way too. Yeah. Um and it really really worked, and just not so making the decision, and then not going back into the thoughts of like the struggle thoughts of, oh, I'd love a drink, because as soon as you start battling in your head, that can make you want it more. So it was like, um I feel like I didn't have that battle too much with that, but I've had it with a lot of other things. So as soon as you go into that battle thing, change, put your attention on something else completely unrelated,
Mm-hmm.
um, because then it's not in your mind, and it's practicing doing that as well. But yeah, the crowding and play, I love that, and I really love the idea of like with food and stuff as well, just adding more good stuff in than taking things out. So you focus on all the good things you can eat, and then the other stuff, yeah, it falls away. So I really like
Yeah,
that belief.
that's powerful. I know this is a little sensitive question to ask, but I'm so curious about it just because I know about how powerful the law of attraction is, and in our creating of our realities, um, how what we believe actually becomes true.
Mm-hmm.
And it's speeding up, in my opinion, in my observation, it's getting very quick, the manifestation of the things that you believe and don't believe. So how much do you think that played a role in your skin changing?
um Oh, I know I manifested it 100%. I believed it. Like, all I wanted my whole life was to be white. And as a child, I was really good at manifesting. And I don't know, wasn't aware of it, but I was so good at it. I remember I used to read these books, Mallory Towers by Enid Blyton, all about this like amazing boarding school. And I just dreamed of going to boarding school. It just wanted it. And then it happened, and it was my worst nightmare. But it happened. I made it happen.
Careful
I
what you wish
manifested
for.
it. Yeah, and I really wanted to. At another point, I wanted to live overseas, and I wanted to go to an international school. I manifested it. I desperately wanted my skin to change. I manifested it. I really, really believe that my skin was because of my beliefs. Absolutely, 100%.
That is so powerful. And so in retrospect, you can maybe see how powerful you are.
Definitely. I am really, yeah, definitely can. And I manifested a lot of things in my life, and some good. Like, I've manifested some really amazing things, and then I've manifested some really not so amazing things that have brought some powerful lessons for me. And, you know, I wouldn't change it because it's brought me to where I am, and I've learned so much and grown so much into the person I am. But yeah, I really believe you get to be really careful with your thoughts and language as well. I work in language and emotions and stuff, and all that stuff ties into the body, and it manifests and creates your world.
So tell us a little bit more about how you work with emotions. When you say that, what do you mean?
So, I studied a style of coaching called ontological coaching. It's the interrelationship of your language, your emotions, and your body to create a new way of being. So it really works on your nervous system, um, and what you speak, you create. So, um, but often our language is the underlying stuff. Underneath our language is our emotions and our moods, and I work from six main moods: resentment, resignation, anxiety, curiosity and wonder, acceptance and peace, there too, and then ambition. And so generally we live in an overarching mood, and then there can be day-to-day emotions that can change, and you can shift the main mood that you're living in. But I guess for me, there was periods where I was living in a lot of resentment, and then there were periods when I was living in a lot of resignation, and anxiety too. I've been through all of them. I guess anxiety was a really big one for me for a really long time. So alcohol hid that, and that's when I'd get my confidence. But our emotions just they if you're living in those powerful emotions for so long, they can also create, dis-ease and illness in your body and stuff like that. So working in your emotions, and so you could start with your language and then look at your emotions based on your language, and then you can go into your body. And you don't always go into the body work in coaching sessions, but all of that stuff, it really ties into how you show up and who you are, and your way of being. It's all really affected by that. So it's, your emotions, suppressing your emotions and pushing them down just makes things so much worse. It's so important to bring them to the surface and really understand what the intention or the reason behind something is, because and often things are unrelated related. It's so interesting. I have some clients, and I've had conversations with people who were like, oh, I just, I'm not sure, like, I always have these new ideas in my business and it's really exciting, but I feel like I'm always forward thinking and like on to the next thing, and it comes down, and you go into a conversation, and I had a conversation once with someone, and we went into it, and underlying that was this deep self-doubt, and this it was but it wasn't immediately, obviously she was not aware of that, but when you went into that and unpacked it, the true story and the true meaning came through, and it was nothing to do with the core issue at all. And when you went into it, it was really emotional. It's really interesting.
Wow, it's so crazy. And I think the thing is a lot of people cover up those emotions. So they just like try to not have them. I know in my own journey, I was given the happy pills to keep you from feeling those emotions, but they just kind of,
Mm.
for me, they just put a wall between me and everything I was feeling. And I felt like a zombie. I just walked around like a zombie. I know a lot of other people have the same experience with those pills. And every time I would try to go off of them, I would, like, of course, start crying because I was in the same situation. Nothing had changed. I,
Mm.
I was just coping with the same situation that wasn't healthy for me. And taking these pills to like just keep maintaining it. So eventually, when I got on my spiritual journey, I started realizing everything you're saying. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all those emotions, all those 10 or 11 years I was taking those pills trying to cover it up, I wasn't not feeling. I was still feeling the entire time, but it was creating a reservoir inside of me of repressed emotional energy that didn't go anywhere. And I ended up getting a cyst on my right ovary, like a huge one, like a grapefruit
Mm.
size, had to be taken out. So yeah, repressing your emotional energy and not facing things definitely causes dis-ease in the body. And this is one of the things I tell people a lot is, if you're having something go wrong with you, the first place to look is, are you not facing something you're feeling?
Yeah, emotions are so huge. And I have experienced that so personally because of my skin, and I know it was my emotions and what I created. So I'm like the poster child of that because I've experienced it in a way. But also, what was I going to say? I really think that, like, oh yeah, so I had postnatal depression, and um I have been depressed before as well, and I for some reason I never went on medication. I think at one point my medication was alcohol,
Yeah,
which was
I've
making
done
it
that.
worse.
Hmm.
Yeah, but well, when I had postnatal depression, I spoke to my doctor who had been there for my baby and stuff, and she's very holistic. So she was like really open to meditation and all that kind of stuff, which was really amazing. And I spoke to a counselor a couple of times, but other than that, I used self care. Like I was determined not to go on medication, and I was in a dark place, and it was all using my own tools and spiritual practices and stuff that got me out of that. And um, I'm a big, I have a program called the self-care experience. So self-care is a big thing for me, um, because it really saved me. And I think those practices and those tools and just really tuning into yourself. And it's not all about practices, it's about setting yourself boundaries and stuff too, so that you're really aligning to your authentic self and, finding your voice, as I like to say, because I think when you do that, you're being yourself and giving yourself permission to be yourself. And that's what unlocks everything and brings you to inner peace and joy.
Mm. Yes, peace and joy. And, anxiety, they've proven that stress and anxiety is the number one cause of disease.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard things about that and stress. You see, like I've seen at certain points of the years we were in really financial stress, and my partner, you saw, like he ended up with vertigo and all kinds of stuff from stress. It was, and any time now, if he gets slightly stressed, it starts to come back. So yeah, it's so related.
Yeah, it impacts your sleep, it impacts your ability to digest food, it impacts your ability to relax and, unwind and let your body integrate the day, so it's a serious thing when you can't come to inner peace. So, what are some of the ways we talked about compassion, but what are some of the ways that you helped yourself come into peace? What are some of your tools and practices around that?
Um, Well, particularly when I was really having my postnatal depression, the first thing I started off kind of slow and I'd get up before my son. I started getting up really early because it was the only time I could find for myself. And I think carving out that time for yourself is really important. And for me, I had to get up at 4 or 5, which cut into my sleep. And at first it was really hard, but I really recommend to people, if you feel like you have no time, finding it, creating it, getting up earlier, because you may feel tired and it may feel draining at first, but that, I believe, the balance will tip and it will be so rewarding. And so then I started with morning pages, as Julia Cameron likes to call it, which is where you stream of conscious for 3 pages before you do anything. You just grab your pen and just start writing for 3 pages. And I started with that every day. And I did that every day for a really long time. And it just got my thoughts and emotions out onto the page. And it was a lot of gibberish. But it helps you tap into your soul. Eventually your soul comes through when you do that stuff too. And then also meditating. And I've been a meditator for a really long time, but at that point I've been out of it. I hadn't really been doing a lot of it, so I got back to it and I started again. I was really gentle with myself, so I started with 1 minute, and then the next day I added 30 seconds, and the next day I added another 30 seconds. And I did it really slowly, and eventually I was meditating for like 30 plus minutes, whatever it was. And it felt so easy, and it felt like nothing, it didn't feel like a really big hurdle because I did it so slowly over a really long period of time. And I was gentle with myself, but I was still committing to me. Yeah. So those were the 2 things that I started with that were really helped and supported me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Journaling is definitely one of those positive practices, and I love
I
how
love
everything that
journaling.
you share is around like sliding into the new practice, like, being
Yeah.
gentle and just gradually growing it and expanding it. That's such a beautiful strategy.
It's what I do. It's how I approach life. I am huge on this. Tiny commitments, little commitments, setting up habits for success. I believe if you start out, and I know a lot of people will just be like, get in there, do it, you'll have success. No, I will not. I will not. That's not how I operate. It's not how my brain works. If I try, it's like exercise. If I tried to do a big workout when I hadn't done much, and I've actually did this once with my partner who's really into fitness and stuff, and we did a boxing workout, and it was hard for me. And not by his standards were completely different. So to him, it was like a light workout, but it was hard to me, And I ended up getting so dizzy that night. I like had this headache. I was really ill. We actually went to the hospital that night because it was so unwell. So for me, I'm the opposite. It has to be small. I learned to run the same way. I started adding like 20 seconds of running really slow. So it took me months, but till I was running like 7K or whatever it was. I don't know what that is in miles, but yeah, it was. I just think if you're gentle with yourself, you trick your brain into not realizing that you're adding anything else. And if you set yourself up in that way, you succeed. And that builds your intuition because you're trusting yourself. Um, Whereas if you fail, it can be so easy to give up. And I actually don't really believe in failure because I believe everything is a lesson, and we always learn from something, so it's actually a gift, and you can see that failure as a success because you've learned something. So I kind of like to frame things and think about things in that way. But in saying that, I do think that, yeah, doing those little things and just building on them, you ease into them and you get comfortable with them, and then you win, and then you want to do more because you've won. And so, yeah, I really approach everything in that way.
That's so beautiful. What a beautiful message. So, I know that you have a podcast
I
because
do.
I was just on it. So, tell us the name of the podcast and where people can find it.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Elevate Your Life and Soul. And it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, and I think iHeartRadio. It's on lots of different channels. And then, I mean, I link to it on my website as well, which is marlakennedy.com. Yeah.
And why did you start that
My
podcast?
podcast,
Yeah.
um, it's just a way for me to, a few reasons, I guess. It's a way for me to have my voice and just speak about the things on my heart. And it's funny because when I was about 18, I went to radio school. So I've always loved, and I've always loved, I studied screenwriting. So I've always been in that stuff and loved that stuff. And I kind of pushed it aside because I wasn't really, I don't know, the industry can be tough. And so that was always there. Um, and then so podcasting to me was kind of a way to get back to that creative, like radio side that I really loved, and writing. And then I love connection, so I kind of alternate. I'll do a solo episode, then I'll interview someone. So the solo episode is a chance for me to just share what's on my heart, and what I'm learning, and what I have to share about what I've learned and my training and how I can support people. And then I interview people for the connection. I mean, I love to interview different people because I think all the people I interview will elevate your life and your soul in different ways. So some of it's really pragmatic and practical stuff, and then some of it's really spiritual. And I love that because that's how I approach life. I really believe we're humans we're having this human experience as spiritual beings, and I believe we get to be grounded in the practical stuff too because that's part of that experience. So I love to share that, and I love to share other people's messages around that
Mm,
too. Yeah.
beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show today and sharing all your beautiful messages with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it.
And I just want to tell everybody, if you really enjoyed this broadcast and you love what Mala had to say, and you know some people that could really benefit from what she just said, then share it out, because the more link backs, it's called a link back, the more link backs to this episode, the more it gets higher in the search results and more people will find it. And if you give us a 5-star review, that's another way to help us to get the message out for more people. There's many voices. We all have many voices. And sometimes you've already heard it 50 times from somebody else, but then somebody comes along and says it and you're like, that's it. I totally get it now. So that's why we do all the interviews, because sometimes it just takes a little while for the right message to hit you in the right way at the right time. So we
Mm.
appreciate you getting it out there. And I'm going to give kisses, and I invite you to join me. We're going to give kisses to the audience, and I always do this at the end. And so we love you. Thank you so much for being on the show, for joining us, and here come your kisses. Mwah,
Oh,
mwah.
oh.
Totally healthy, germ-free, distant, energetic kisses.
I love it.
Love you guys. We'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now.